Look at how many lines are actually there. It's an incredible number. Over 800 lines total. Hundreds of geometric shapes, and at least 100 animals are present in this whole area. 100 years of guessing just ended in 6 months. Buried under one of the driest, most unforgiving deserts on Earth. Archaeologists just uncovered over 300 hidden figures no human eye had ever caught. Not with satellites, not with planes, not even standing right on top of them. What finally found them wasn't a lucky dig or a new theory. The precision of these lines is super impressive, even by modern survey standards, because many of them are just dead straight. It was artificial intelligence scanning the Nazca Desert in ways no one thought possible. And what it just revealed doesn't just add to the mystery. It may have just cracked it wide open. The Nazca Lines. Here's what we're actually talking about. The Nazca Lines sit in the arid coastal plains of southern Peru, about 250 miles south of Lima. They were carved by the Nazca culture mostly between 200 BC and AD 650, with some of the oldest lines showing influence from the earlier Paracas culture. In 1994, music. UNESCO named the site a World Heritage Site, recognizing it as one of the most extraordinary archaeological landscapes on Earth. The scale is hard to overstate. Hundreds of designs are etched across roughly 170 square miles of desert. Geometric shapes, dead straight lines running for miles, and the figures most people recognize instantly. Who made them? When were they made? Why? What's the purpose of them? The monkey with its spiral tail, the spider, the hummingbird frozen mid-flight, the condor with outstretched wings, the whale, the tree, and the mysterious hands with 2 fingers of different lengths. None of this should have survived, but the Nazca Desert is one of the driest places on the planet, with music, almost no rainfall, and very little ground-level wind. That combination is the entire reason these designs are still here almost 2,000 years later. How were they made? Quick myth bust. The Nazca people didn't dig trenches. The technique was much simpler and honestly more clever. The desert floor is covered in dark, oxidized stones. Just beneath sits lighter soil. Nazca artists simply cleared the dark stones along an outline, exposing the pale ground underneath. That contrast is the entire design. Many of these lines are only a few inches deep. No excavation, no massive earth moving, just careful, deliberate clearing. And because the region gets almost no rain and very little erosion at ground level, that shallow contrast has held for nearly 2 millennia. Simple method, brutal environment, perfect preservation. It's a rare combination. Theories that dominated for decades. For most of the 20th century, the real question wasn't how the lines were made. It was why. 4 theories dominated the conversation. Astronomy. German mathematician Maria Reisch spent decades starting in the 1940s arguing that many lines aligned with the sun, moon, and stars, a giant calendar carved into the ground. Some individual alignments checked out, but across hundreds of geoglyphs pointing in every direction, the math simply didn't cover the whole site. But scientists eventually date the lines to between 300 BC and 800 AD, which means all of them predate the Incas. Water. Other researchers linked certain lines and trapezoids to underground water sources and ancient irrigation channels called puquios. In one of the driest deserts on Earth. That theory made intuitive sense, but again, it couldn't explain every figure. Religious music ceremony. This is the theory that's aged the best. The idea, the lines were tied to ritual, movement, and belief. Keep this one in mind. You'll see exactly why by the end of this video. Aliens. Music. Then there's the theory everyone's actually heard of. Swiss author Erich von Däniken popularized it in his Music 1968 book Chariots of the Gods, suggesting the lines were landing strips or messages, music for extraterrestrial visitors. It's a great story. It has sold a lot of books. But let's be honest and balanced here. There is no archaeological evidence supporting it. Every artifact, every excavation, every scrap of Nazca pottery points to a human civilization with its own tools, music, its own beliefs, and its own reasons for carving these lines, not a visiting one. For 100 red years, none of these theories fully closed the case. That's exactly the gap new technology was about to fill. Music. Before we get to that, if you want to see exactly how archaeologists finally cracked this open, hit subscribe now. Because what happened next didn't just add a few new drawings to the map. It rewrote what we thought we knew about the entire site. The AI breakthrough. In 2024, researchers from the Nazca Institute at Yamagata University in Japan, led by archaeologist Masato Sakai, who has studied the Nazca Lines since 1994, partnered with scientists from IBM Research's Thomas Music J. Watson Research Center in Yorktown Heights, New York. Together, they built an AI system designed to solve a problem that had frustrated human surveyors for a century: spotting faint weathered geoglyphs that are nearly invisible to the naked eye, especially the smaller, music relief-type figures that don't stand out even in high-resolution aerial photographs. We know they didn't just appear out of thin air, but there is virtually no historical record of previous societies in Peru. The team trained the model on aerial imagery and drone footage covering the full extent of the Nazca Pampa and its surrounding desert. The AI learned to recognize subtle visual patterns, shifts in soil tone, faint outlines, orientation cues that human eyes tend to miss after staring at thousands of photographs. It then flagged candidate locations for archaeologists to physically investigate on the ground. Music. In total, the system identified more than 1,300 candidate sites across the region. A number no research team could have manually reviewed in any reasonable time frame using traditional methods. The result of 6 months of AI-assisted fieldwork was staggering. Researchers confirmed 303 entirely new figurative geoglyphs. For context, it had taken nearly a century of traditional survey work on foot from early aircraft in the 1920s and later using satellite imagery to identify a total of 430 figurative geoglyphs in the entire region. In 6 months, this one AI-assisted survey nearly doubled that entire century of discovery. According to the research team, that's roughly a 16-fold increase in the pace of discovery compared to traditional music visual survey methods. It's worth being precise about what the AI actually did because this is where a lot of headlines get it wrong. The AI didn't dig anything up. It didn't interpret meaning, culture, or ritual significance. What it did was radically compress the search process, turning a task that would have taken human researchers years of manual image review into a matter of months. Every single flagged location still had to be checked, verified, and documented by trained archaeologists walking the actual terrain. This was a partnership between machine pattern recognition and human expertise, not a replacement of one by the other. The findings were significant enough to be published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, one of the most rigorously reviewed scientific journals in the world. A strong signal that the archaeological community considered this discovery both credible and important. To appreciate music, how big a leap this was, it helps to know how the lines were originally found in the first place. The geoglyphs weren't really discovered in music a formal sense until the 1920s and 30s, when Peruvian pilots flying over the desert began noticing strange shapes in the ground below. In 1941, American historian Paul Kosick started studying the site in detail and proposed the astronomical calendar idea that would later be championed by Maria Ricci. It receives only 1 millimeter of rain a year. And because there's no rain in this area, Ricci then spent more than 5 decades on the ground mapping and physically protecting the lines from damage, largely working with little more than a tape measure, a notebook, and sheer persistence. That's the baseline. This new AI-assisted approach was competing against decades of painstaking human observation, one figure at a time. The Yamagata University team didn't jump straight from tape music measures to full AI deployment overnight, either. Sakai's team had already spent years combining satellite imagery, traditional aerial photography, and drone footage to slowly expand the known catalog of geoglyphs, confirming individual new figures, including a large killer whale figure identified in 2019 and a roughly 120 feet cat-shaped geoglyph confirmed in 2020. A find that drew international headlines on its own. Those earlier discoveries were still slow one-by-one confirmations. It was only when IBM's machine learning model was applied at full scale across the entire Nazca PMPA at once that the process shifted from finding individual figures over months to finding hundreds of them within a single field season. The project also drew on high-resolution geospatial imagery contributed by the German Aerospace Music Center, giving the AI model an even richer dataset of the terrain to search through. One detail that impressed researchers most was how little training data the model actually needed. Relief-type geoglyphs are notoriously subtle, faint, low contrast, and easy forward. Even a trained eye to walk right past. Yet, according to the research team, the AI system performed effectively at detecting these harder-to-spot figures. Music, even with a relatively limited number of confirmed examples to learn from. That matters because it suggests the approach isn't a one-off trick that only works at Nazca. It's a method that could plausibly be retrained and redeployed at other archaeological sites with similarly sparse existing data, provided researchers have enough aerial or drone imagery to feed it. The discovery that changed the debate. Here's where the story stops being about quantity and starts being about meaning. Because it's not just that researchers found 303 new geoglyphs. It's what those geoglyphs revealed when compared to the ones we already knew about. When the team analyzed the full newly expanded catalog, a pattern emerged that hadn't been nearly as visible before. There appear to be two distinct categories of figurative geoglyphs, each apparently built for a different purpose. Large line-type geoglyphs are the giants, the ones most people picture when they think of Nazca. Enormous animal figures and huge geometric shapes fully appreciable only from the air. The locals really talk about these as connected to an irrigation system, a way of getting water to flow throughout the area. These tend to sit near the sprawling network of long straight lines and trapezoids crossing the pampa. And researchers believe they may have functioned as gathering, music points, or markers along ceremonial routes. According to the study, wild animals make up roughly 64% of the subjects in this category. Condors, monkeys, and other creatures drawn at a scale meant to dominate the landscape itself. Smaller relief-type geoglyphs tell a very different story. These are more modest in size, and they depict a different set of subjects entirely. Human figures, domesticated llamas, birds, fish, and more strikingly, depictions of severed heads and other overtly ritual imagery. Unlike the giants, these smaller figures sit close to walking trails, positioned at a scale that suggests they were meant to be encountered by someone walking past on foot, not viewed from a plane or a hilltop. That distinction changes everything about how we should picture this landscape. It's not one giant uniform artwork built for a single purpose. It looks increasingly like a deliberately organized ritual landscape built in layers. Large-scale communal markers on one hand, and more intimate personal imagery meant to be discovered along a journey on the other. According to the research, more than 81% of the newly confirmed relief-type geoglyphs depict human-related subjects, humanoid figures, decapitated heads, or domesticated animals like llamas. A sharp contrast to the wild, animal-dominated giants that made Nazca famous in the first place. That's not a small statistical detail. It suggests two very different design intentions operating across the same desert, built by the same culture for two very different kinds of viewers. Think about what that actually implies on the ground. If you were a Nazca farmer or pilgrim walking one of these trails roughly 1,500 years ago, you likely wouldn't have seen the giant condor or the whale at all. Those were built for an audience that could rise above the landscape. Whether that meant a low hilltop, a specific vantage point, or simply an intended viewer who was never meant to be human in the first place, but you would have passed directly beside a modestly-sized human figure or a small llama or a stark image of a severed head close enough to touch. That's an entirely different kind of communication. It's not a monument meant to be admired from a distance. It's closer to a wayside shrine, something meant to be encountered personally, step by step, on a specific journey. This two-tier system also helps explain something that used to puzzle researchers. Why the Nazca went to the trouble of building figures so enormous that the people who made them could never have seen them completed from ground level. If the giant line-type figures were built as communal markers meant to organize large-scale ritual activity, visible in outline even to someone standing at ground level tracing the lines, music, and perhaps fully readable only to whatever the Nazca considered a higher observer. While the smaller relief figures were built, music for the individual pilgrim walking past, then the size difference stops being mysterious. It becomes intentional design matched precisely to two different audiences and two different roles within the same religious system.